And the beauty of living your life moment to moment is that we have hundreds of moments that happen every single day. Get out of an all or nothing mindset and start understanding that you're one moment away from your entire life changing.
If you obsess over the latest and greatest tools for performance, I've got news for you. It ain't the tool. When I say tool, this could be anything from software as a service in the corporate world. It could be golf clubs. It could be a guitar. It could be fishing lures, or even weight training implements. Look, I'm not saying tools don't matter. They absolutely can and do, but they're not the first thing we need to optimize. We need to look at people and processes first, especially if we're talking about the corporate world, but this could extend to you, your goals, how you approach accomplishing the things that you want to accomplish in life. Here's the problem with focusing on the tool first. You can have the best tool in place for yourself, your team, your office, whatever. But if the people using the tools are ineffective, they're lazy, slow, poor communicators, sloppy, lacking job-specific skills, on and on and on, then the upgrade in tool that they or you use is not going to solve the problem. And it's the same thing for fixing broken processes. If you have bad habits, if you have, any broken communication or process in the corporate world with your team, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what the tool is. So I know that most of this is through the lens of the corporate world, but I think if you're really hearing what I'm saying, you can figure out how to apply this to your personal life. And even if you're not a leader at work, you go to work. So you're a part of that team. Remember, it's people and processes first, then tools. And with that, we're going to kick off today's episode of the Move the Chains podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Munsey. Thank you so much for being here. As an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and keynote speaker, I help athletes, executives, and business leaders take the next steps towards their successes. Everyone needs a big goal, but unless you attack it one step at a time, you will get overwhelmed and fall short. Breaking your big goals down into actionable, manageable steps is what I help you do. Each week on this show, I will give you the best tools and tips to achieve those big dreams, but also interview some of the world's most successful folks and learn how they've managed to push through and attain their dreams. Our guest this week on the Move the Chains podcast is Brant Menswar, a former rock star turned best-selling author. He's certified in the psychology of leadership from Cornell University and has been named one of the country's top speakers. I'm excited to learn from him alongside you in today's episode. So Brant, welcome to the show.
Thanks, brother. Excited to be here.
Dude, you got to tell me how you go from rock star to one of the best speakers in the world. But I mean, how do you even become a rock star? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the description of rock star. It's very loose. It depends on who we're talking to. We were just famous enough to make a living at it for 20 years.
That's
but
amazing.
It's good, but not famous enough that anybody really knows who the hell we were. So I was already an old man before the music bug sort of took over. I was 30 before I quit my job and became a full-time singer-songwriter to start, where I would tour all over the country and play coffee shops and churches and music halls and anywhere I could that would let me play. And after a couple of years of doing, 75 to 100 gigs a year, I had built up enough momentum to look at what the next level might look like, and added a couple members to the band, took them over, met a couple of them in the UK while we were touring over there, came back, formed a band, signed our first major record deal in 2007. And, we toured hard for a couple of years. We left after 2 years, when our next album was due on that label, and decided to take a break. And so I became the artist in residence for the Not for Sale campaign, which is a nonprofit focused on fighting human trafficking all over the world. And myself and the founder of that organization, we would go all over the world and do a show together. So I would perform, he would tell stories in between my songs, and it became really popular. We raised millions of dollars to battle human trafficking. And my final swan song of that being the artist in residence was an 18 show tour that was like 18 shows in 19 days or something like that. It was crazy. And what I planned on doing was hanging it up at the end of those 18 shows. And by the end of those 18 shows, we had another record deal and toured for another 10 more years. So, so much for planning, but that was how I became a rock star. And, that's truly only legitimate in the state of Iowa and the country of Romania. Everybody else, not quite sure who we are or what we do.
That's great, man. I love the jokes too, because my buddies joke with me I'm the best-selling author in Fargo, North Dakota or something. Like we just, you just make up. Sorry if anybody listening is in Fargo, but
I'm telling you, Amazon
awesome.
is famous for best-selling author. Amazon Ant Farts on a Tuesday, launched at 3:46 a.m. I'm on that list. Yes.
Yep. There you go. It still counts, right?
It still counts, baby. Still counts.
Well, dude, that's so cool that, I mean, you're doing what you love and you're getting to have a huge impact, with the not for sale work. Yeah. I mean, how rewarding was that?
I'll say this. It was completely eye-opening at first to realize that slavery is alive and well. This was back in, 2009 to 2011-ish, somewhere in that ballpark is when I did that. And all the different ways that we contribute to the slave trade without even knowing it. The coffee that we buy, the chocolate that we buy.
All right, those are two of my favorite things to ingest. So
yeah,
you got to tell me.
Tell you, brother.
Like, is there a good option?
Yeah, I mean, your safest bet is to look for things that are fair trade. If they're stamped fair trade, that's part of the challenge. That's handled. But ethically sourced, people who work with farmer co-ops are you have a better chance of making sure that everyone's receiving a livable wage and proper, conditions and all that sort of thing. But yeah, some of my favorite chocolate candy bars, some of my favorite coffee brands, were just gone out the window because they got F's in the sourcing and manufacturing of their product. I won't name names, but they are the biggest names. Sure.
Yes. Yeah. No. I was not going to ask for names, but no, that's fascinating. So then, how does your career evolve from jamming on a guitar to doing what you do on a stage and in the corporate world?
It's funny. Looking back. Like, I have really no idea how we survived for almost 20 years as full-time musicians, because it's tough. It's really tough. As an independent musician, even after we signed our record, we signed one deal with a major and then one with a boutique label, the second time around. And it's a never ending quest, right? Like, you're the musician, the artist, the marketer, the licensing person, you have a machine behind you that you end up taking over and having to do all those different things and trying to get innovative in how you manage expenses on the road. How do you fill open dates? You got to be out touring to make money. That's the only way you're going to make money as a musician. Nobody buys music anymore. So you gotta go to the live shows. You gotta sell your t-shirts. You gotta, back when we were touring heavy, it was still CDs and, streaming was just starting to happen. But for the most part, the live shows were where it was at. And so, I did that for a long time. And around 12, my oldest son, Theo, was diagnosed with this rare blood cancer. And it was going to force me to be off the road and closer to home. And so that's sort of what initially pulled me off. Theo ended up battling for 9 years before he passed away from a combination of cancer and COVID in 2021 when the pandemic hit. And so it was this transition from one platform to another. So being on stage for over a decade, it was sort of my home. It was where I felt most comfortable. And the idea of going back to working at a desk somewhere just fucking scared the shit out of me, if I'm being honest. Like, I couldn't go back. There's no way. I can't do it. So a buddy of mine who I happened to meet while I was out touring, who was in a band in a similar scenario, had been touring for a long time, and he was ready to sort of transition to the next phase of his life. He started an organization called Banding People Together, which was a bunch of former rock stars and hit songwriters. And we would go into organizations and we'd teach them the art of collaboration through songwriting. And so we'd go in, break people up into groups. Those groups became bands. Those bands wrote original songs. We would take the songs they wrote in the session back to the studio, record them just like you'd hear on the radio, and send them back to the client as a thank you. And that's how I got started sort of in the keynote giving, because each one of these sessions started with about a 45-minute keynote on the art of collaboration.
That's interesting. As you're talking through that, the name of the podcast is Move the Change Podcast, right? And
yeah.
The philosophy is breaking big things down into manageable chunks. And something that you said really caught my attention, where, when you were on the road, you're wearing all the hats, right? Yeah. You talk about, doing the finance, doing the marketing to fill shows and selling merch, and you're writing songs, and there's a lot to be done. And then there's also that aspect of it where, like you said, it's 10 years, it's 20 years, it's a never ending pursuit.
Yeah.
So how did you, obviously you're somebody who has learned how to manage yourself, your time, your energy. You've been successful in achieving multiple different goals through your life, especially during that era. How did you prioritize things? How did you break things down into, manageable chunks, and so that you didn't get overwhelmed and stuck?
Yeah. So I would say a couple of things. One is you have to be really creative to exist as a musician full-time who doesn't have a side gig. And even at that, I found myself over the course of 20 years with side gigs that worked while I was still on the road. So things that I could do back in the MySpace days, back when, sort of these bots first existed of promoting shows. And I found ways to use technology to promote shows that I ended up signing on a few large promotion agencies that would pay me, a couple $100 to promote every show that they had on their roster. And, that in its heyday would make me probably $50K a year while I was still just touring on the road. And all I had to do was just sort of plug in the information into the bots and let the bots do their thing. And this is back before, bots were really a thing. This is back, I think I had 7 or 8 laptops set up in my office, all running these bots at the same time, which I probably would go to jail for today with the spam laws, but this is long before that was ever a thing. But, understanding that innovation is incredibly important even in your own life, right? You don't have to create the next iPhone, but you got to be innovative in how you're approaching your goals. And so for me, even, the last 6 months, so I was working in the corporate world. I was the vice president of business development for one of the largest commercial collection agencies in the world. And so I handled the client side, right? So I managed the salespeople who were talking to the clients, trying to get them to give us their bad debt that we would attempt to go collect from a business to business standpoint. And I lived in New Hampshire, but I worked in New York, and I would commute on Sunday night. I'd drive from New Hampshire to Westchester County, and I would stay there until Thursday, and I'd drive home on Thursday night and be home for the weekend. Well, I was staying at a Holiday Inn Express, which was closest to the office there. And they had a bar and, whatever, downstairs, your typical thing. And I realized that if I really wanted to be a musician, I had to learn how to control expenses on the road. And that was one of the hardest parts, unless you're going to just crash on somebody's couch every night, which, again, I was already 30 years old. I'm like, the days of me crashing on somebody's couch is long gone by this point. I already had 2 kids. So, it was a scenario for me where I was like, hey, I had set this date that I knew I wanted to quit my job to be a full-time musician. So I started to book gigs from that date forward. So by the time I reached that date, I already had 70 gigs booked for the next year. Right. And these aren't all like, oh, I'm going to get paid $1,000 a gig. These are like a couple $100 tips, maybe, churches you're playing for a love offering, like who knows, like you're just taking anything you can possibly get. And so for the 6 months just before I was going to quit on that date, I was staying at this Holiday Inn for 4 nights a week. So I went to the manager and I was like, hey, you want some live music in your bar on the nights that I'm here? I mean, I'm here anyways. And so I'll tell you what, don't pay me. Give me 20,000 priority points every night that I play. So it was funny money to them. Didn't cost them a dime. They can give 20,000 priority points to any guest for any reason without approval from anyone. And so I was like, give me 4 nights a week. I will play 4 nights a week. Give me those 20,000 priority points, which equal 1 free night for me to stay in the Holiday Inn chain of hotels anywhere in the country. So for 6 months, I did that. And so by the time that I quit, I had a free year's worth of staying on the road anywhere I wanted to stay that had a Holiday Inn somewhere close. And that's how I survived that first year, by not having to pay $150 a night to go stay at a hotel somewhere. I just built it into them. And for them, they loved it. I provided a value. They had live music. They could promote that. I was good enough that they wanted to promote it. Thank God. Right. And so it was like a win-win, but I wouldn't have thought of that. Most people would have just gone, I'm going to hang out for 6 months and not worry about it. But I had to find a way to get innovative in the future that hadn't happened yet, because I knew that it was going to crush me the minute I got there.
I love that story. That example is like, it's the hustle, the savvy, the creativity. I want to come back to that because I don't want to jump too far yet, but I feel like that hustle and savvy is going to play a part in your efforts now for we'll just say your book that launched on the 6th. So I want to hear how you're being creative with the marketing there. But before we get into that, take me back to those first keynotes where you're teaching collaboration. What did you learn? What were some of the big aha moments that are now arrows in your quiver to help large groups, small groups of any size align and move forward in a united fashion?
Experience trumps content every single time. If they have a good experience, the content can be mediocre and you'll still find success. But if you have great content with a bad experience, it doesn't matter how good the content is, it will never deliver.
That is something that I've learned the hard way over the years as a speaker. And it's something that I've been talking to people about recently as a learning that I have kind of taken in and put into practice over the last few years. But initially, when I first started speaking, I felt like I had to fire hose people with information and say like, okay, if you give me 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever time slot I had, I felt like I needed to cram as much information into that as possible.
Yeah.
And over the time, I've learned that it really doesn't matter what I say. What matters is exactly what you said, how they engage with it and also what they retain and can take away. But I have not formulated it or articulated it as beautifully as you did there. So do you have any tricks that you like to do to that you can share with us? I don't give away your secrets.
I'm happy.
This is what you do for a living, but how do you create amazing experiences?
I'll say two things. One is you have to get people emotionally connected, period. That's number one. The second thing I'm going to say is you have to own your content to a point that you don't need any help from slides, from anything, that you can leave enough space in the room while you're speaking to capture the truth in the room. And what I would tell you is that most speakers are great presenters, but they're not great speakers. They understand how to present the content they have. But if the slides go down, if the power goes out, they're done. Show's over. A great speaker owns the content in such a fashion that a tornado could come and suck the building away, and you could pick up from wherever you are and continue because you know what you're talking about. You know how it's structured. And that, for me, is the secret. You have to think of your talks that you're going to give, break them down into sections. I follow something taught by Tamsin Webster, who's a dear friend who wrote a book called Find Your Red Thread. And she teaches this red thread message, which is how our minds understand narrative, right? And so she has this framework that she teaches, which is you start with the goal, you talk about the challenge, you talk about the truth, you ask them to change, and then you tell them how to do it. And so every single talk I have is broken into those 5 things. So it doesn't matter if you want me to speak for 40 minutes or for 90 minutes. It doesn't matter because I know what section I'm in. And if I've got 30 seconds to talk about it in that section, or I have 30 minutes to talk about it, I'll be fine because I know what section I'm in and I can stay in that section for as long or as little as I need to without being tied to a script that I've memorized or a slide on the screen. And that's one of the tricks that I've learned as I've gotten more experience and gotten better at keynoting is my slides used to be filled with information. And now my slides are either an image or a single word and nothing more, because I need the flexibility to pivot if the audience is not connecting emotionally. And so that's what I've learned for 10 years now of doing this is give yourself the ability to pivot and you will turn even the worst scenario into something really powerful.
So there's a couple of things in there. When you're talking about the power of emotional connections, it's reminding me of, one of the acronyms that you have in your new book, OGRE. I want to get to that. Again, as you're talking through that, I had this thought of, that ownership of information is how I would call it, or how I would phrase that, right? And so one of the things I always ask people when I'm speaking is, I have what I would call human operating system as one of the things that I teach. And I'll ask people, are you a chef or are you a cook? And then we go into that conversation of what's the difference, right? And a chef is somebody that doesn't need the recipe card. And I want to help people get to that point of ownership of information of, your mind, your body, how it works and how we make decisions and all these things. And again, like I hear a lot of psychology of behavior in what you're talking about. Yeah. And so I want to get to the book. But I also think, if we're talking about how you create a great experience as a keynote, but I really hope people listening don't tune out because they're saying, hey, I'm not a keynote speaker. What do I care? But that's so much of what you just outlined is how you can, again, we got there talking about how you get people to align on a common goal and move in that direction and collaborate. And so if you can apply that to, your small department at work or a larger team or your family unit, whatever it might be. There's a lot of gold in there. Let's talk about your book. You got a new book. It came out May 6th. How's it doing? What's been kind of the biggest, it's designing momentum.
Yep. So let's back up for 1 second. I'll tell you that in 2020, I came out with my first big book called Black Sheep. And it was all about discovering what I call your black sheep values. And these are those deeply held personal core values that, like a black sheep's wool, cannot be changed. And so the book taught you how to discover your flock of 5 black sheep values. You need these values to be able to live your life with deliberate intention. You need these values to be able to create a purpose, choose a purpose for your life that's going to be in alignment with the things that matter most to you. And so that's where it all started. And for the last few years, that's all I've talked about in my keynotes. This new book talks about how do we create momentum in a world filled with uncertainty. So when my son passed away in 21, I just fell off the deep end. I disconnected from pretty much everyone and everything in my life. And for 18 months, I sort of put myself on an island and lost every ounce of momentum that I had built up to that point. And it took a dear friend sort of coming to me and saying, look, I know you've been through something horrible. I'm really sorry you had to go through that. But what I want to know is this. I believe that when you die, you really die twice. He said, I believe the first is when you leave this earth, but the second is when your name is spoken for the last time. So what I want to know is, what are you doing to make sure Theo's second life outlives his first? Because the wallowing is not going to get it done. And that was some tough love, man.
That's a good friend.
It's a good friend. And it's a friend that at one time you want to tell him to fuck off, and at the other time you want to hug him at the same time, because you know you needed to hear it, but it hurt at that moment to hear it. I couldn't focus on anything other than the moment in front of me. I just didn't have it in me at that point. I was broken. I made a bunch of bad decisions, and just the only thing I could do was focus on the moment I was in and nothing more. And so that's where I started. And so I focused on the moment in front of me, the moment in the present, and I tried to create momentum in that moment and nothing more. And doing it over and over and over and over again is how I started to pull myself out of this hole that I had dug for myself. And fast forward now a couple of years, I'm still living my life that way, and it's turned into incredible momentum because I've let the 5-year plans go. It's not that I don't have goals. I still have goals, but my approach to those 5-year plans is moment by moment. And so the book talks about something that I call momentum. How do you own a moment with such power that you can catapult yourself forward over a lot of the challenges that you face? And so that's what the book is. And it's sort of the next step. You know what values you have, and you can start to act with deliberate intention. Well, now you have to start owning moments to be able to create the momentum you need in your life to get to that next level.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I love that step-by-step process. As you're telling that story, I can't help but wonder if some of those acronyms were things that you said to yourself going through that journey to regain momentum for yourself. What if there was a way?
Yeah. So interesting enough, in the thinking less than of yourself, when you're down, when you suffer a massive loss and you're not in the best headspace, it's hard to see anything past where you are at the moment. And if you do, it's mostly dread, and that uncertainty becomes a demotivator in every way, shape, and form. One of the things that I had discovered while I was building my Keynote career is there was a ceiling, I thought, of how much someone would pay a guy with a guitar that's name is not Bono. And I wanted to get past the ceiling that I was at. And so I thought that I needed more credibility. And so I went back to school. I went to Cornell. I got certified in the psychology of leadership. I'm like, if I'm going to go somewhere, let's go Ivy League. Let's not give anybody any reason to question anything and go hard and shove it in their faces when they say, what is this guy with a guitar going to teach me? Right. And so, I did. I went back to school and got my certification, and it didn't matter one iota. What I discovered was if you give them a good enough experience, it just doesn't matter. And so I started to focus on the experience and how do we create momentum in the moment for everybody sitting in a room listening to you talk for an hour. And so my talk changed and the presentation changed and my visuals changed and the experience and how I approached it changed because I was only focused on the moment I was in, not on what's going to happen next month, 3 months, next year, how many gigs am I going to have in 2025? It just was only focused on the moment in front of me. And that mindset shift to what if there was a way became my mantra, because one of the things I discovered when I went back to school is our brains have a biological desire for certainty. And so its job is to be certain no matter what. What I didn't say was that it has to be certainly correct. Because your brain doesn't care if it's right or wrong. It just wants to be certain. And so I started to really think about sort of the dialogue that was going on inside my head. And if I'm going to be certain about something, I got to make it something positive. I've got to find some way to be optimistic coming out of this really dark time where optimism was at the bottom of my list of things that I was capable of. And so what I discovered was approaching every challenge you have by asking, what if there's a way, is a hack to make your brain focus on possibilities rather than probabilities. And when I started to do that, I started to find solutions instead of excuses.
I love that. And not only solutions, but creative solutions like the one that you laid out earlier with the Holiday Inn, play, and every night you play, you get a free stay. To me, it sounds a lot like, you're basically doing similar to neuro-linguistic programming or developmental language, where as soon as you ask yourself that question, what if there was a way, your brain immediately starts to think about potential ways. Like you said, possibilities. They don't have to be probabilities. They don't all have to work out, but you almost start an internal brainstorming, exercise or session. It's great. I love that. So let's talk about one of the other acronyms, OGRE. I love this. I think we can go a lot of different ways with this because, my book is Fuck Your Feelings. We're well aware of how emotions can drive decisions.
Yes.
And in the way that I'm presenting it there, it's a bad thing. I think you've got a way of presenting it where it can be very powerful in a positive way. So explain what OGRE is and how you're leveraging that.
Yeah. So I came up with this acronym of OGRE, which stands for an overwhelming gut reaction of emotion. And these OGRE moments that we experience are moments that are filled with emotion that we have to do something with. It can be positive emotion, like happiness or excitement. It could be fear. It could be anxiety. There's so many different things. But when we have this unquestionable amount of emotion within a moment itself, those are the moments that have the most potential to create the maximum amount of momentum. And in my head, and actually the image that I use in my talks is an ogre crashing through a wall like the Kool-Aid man. Because that's how ogre moments arrive. They don't arrive with a warning. They just arrive with this rush of emotion that now you have to deal with. And so these ogre moments, we have to be able to recognize them on one side, deal with them while they're happening, but also learn how to create them so that we can create this momentum that we long for to get to these goals that have been out of our reach for a long time. And so these ogre moments, if you think about it, any viral video you have ever watched in your entire life is an ogre moment. It's either funny, sad, touching, joyful, whatever it might be. The emotion has to be there first before anyone wants to share it. And that is a really powerful learn when you're trying to create momentum. If you can recognize it, and the reason I say that is because in the research for this book, the one thing that we have recognized in talking to a ton of people about these moments that have catapulted them forward, most of them did not recognize the moment when it happened. They only recognized it when they reflected upon it afterwards. And so when we see and feel these ogre moments, if we can capture them and direct them in the direction we want them to go, they have massive potential to expand your impact.
How would somebody go about channeling such emotional energy into a positive direction?
So if you remember back to science class, momentum, the scientific formula for momentum is mass times velocity. So mass comes from the emotion, right? It gives it weight, and velocity is all about direction. And so when you have these emotions, you've got to learn that within that emotion, we're looking for four things. We're looking for belonging, understanding, meaning, and purpose. If we can create those things in the moment, we can then choose where we direct this. Is this something that gets shared at work with a team or your boss? Is it something that gets shared at home with your partner or your family or your spouse? Is this something that gets shared on social media that can extend its reach and impact? And so the first part of it is making sure that there is a sense of belonging, understanding, meaning, and purpose. And if you think of any video that you have ever watched that has millions and millions and millions of views, those four things are present no matter what. There is a sense of belonging. You see yourself in that clip. There is a sense of understanding of what's going on in this moment. There's meaning behind whatever it is. And then there's this bit of purpose, and purpose is really, in the sense that we are using it in the book, purpose is about next steps. And so for viral clips, that next step is you end up sharing it with somebody else. In a meeting, it might be, what are the next steps that have to happen for us to achieve this goal that we've set for ourselves? Like, you got to walk out of the meeting with some next steps or you're not going to have momentum. And so those four things, belonging, understanding, meaning, and purpose, is how we own a moment. And then you have to be really smart about the direction in which you want to share it. Is it personal? Is it small group, or is it widespread?
That's really interesting to hear how you break it down. And I think we all know that there are so many elements at play in real time, and you're kind of creating this roadmap for, understanding it. What do you think? Obviously this is something that you've taught and you've got experience of being in the room with people before it's gone into the book. What are some of the, obstacles that people would face trying to learn how to wield this in real time? Because I think you and I both know the awareness and then the real time like wedge to sort of get in between, say, stimulus and response. Like that's really where all this has to happen, right? And in a lot of instances, it's a very small window of time.
What I would say is this, going back to owning your material. Part of that from a personal perspective is knowing your non-negotiables. Less than 1% of people can tell you what their 5 non-negotiable values actually are. So when you don't know, you wing it. And winging it requires 2 things for success, luck or accidents. And I don't know anybody that wants to base the success of their life or organization on luck or accidents. So what I would say is the obstacles that you face in these moments of an ogre moment is, number 1, because you have not defined your values, you are driven by emotion. And emotions are absolute shit collaborators when it comes to making good decisions. A good decision, the way that we define it, a good decision is one that is rooted in your values, that makes sure that it goes beyond the truth in the room and also acknowledges how you feel in the moment. That's a good decision. It has nothing to do with an outcome because we don't control outcomes. We only control the deliberate intention that goes into making a decision, and then it's out of our hands. So the obstacles become, you don't have value. You don't have your values identified. You allow emotions to drive the bus. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a precarious scenario, usually when you are full of emotion and you have no idea what to do with it because you don't know the areas in which your values would tell you to push it. And that is what this book tries to help you understand is the moment that you have. If I know, for me, creativity, hope, impact, empathy, family, authenticity, those are my values. So in an ogre moment, I can build bridges to these values and go, God, is this something that's about creativity? Do I share about how this allowed me to be really creative in the moment? Is it something about connection or family? Do I take this moment and connect it to my boss, to my family? These values give me options that are deliberate options, not winging it options. And when I choose the deliberate option, I'm building bridges between my value and the moment. And those are the most powerful ways to create momentum.
I love this. If anybody has a signed copy of my book and you feel like it's personal, I don't want to burst your bubble, but Brant, when I sign, my default book signing is, may your actions always align with your goals and values. And I mean, dude, we're like on the same wavelength here about emotions driving decisions. And we really want to get to a place where our decisions are aligned with our values. I love this. This is awesome. I'm actually going to grab a copy of the previous one too, the Black Sheep, because I want to go through how you set that up. And I'm pumped to dig into designing momentum. Couple of last questions, and then we'll let you get on with your day. I know the book is out now. As you looked at the marketing for this, is there anything that you have done or are going to do that would fit into that category that we talked about earlier, like the Holiday Inn thing? Like, I know there's the traditional, all the things that you do, but is there something that really stands out to you as like, this is an idea that gets me excited, or I'm really proud of thinking of this outside the box thing?
Yeah. So one in particular, we have printed up a ton of challenge coins that say Moment Maker on them. And we carry these around with us to give to people who own the moment they're in when we are there. So it's a very personal thing. It could be, a waiter at a restaurant. It could be, the person checking you in at the hotel. It could be a friend in need. It could be, the scenarios are endless. But to be able to hand somebody this challenge coin and say to them, you have owned this moment in such a powerful way, it's moved me to act. And that deserves recognition. And so I want you to take this coin. And every time you doubt yourself, I want you to look at this coin and I want you to understand that owning your moment is your way to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. No matter how good or bad you're facing it right now, this coin is a reminder that you're one moment away from everything changing. And when you finally feel confident enough, I want you to pass that coin on to somebody else that needs it in that moment. And that to us is an incredibly personal way to encourage somebody, because the last bit of momentum, there are three, we talk about this in the book, there are three sort of levels, if you will, of momentum. The first is living, right? Where you're living moment to moment. It's survival mode. And most of us, especially in our early lives, find ourselves there. And sometimes it creeps in later in life as well. The second is lifting, which is you have a change in your desire and expectation. And so you want to lift yourself up to that next level. And those desires and expectations are driving you. And then the final is legacy. And legacy is all about how much momentum you create for other people. And that's the final stage. That, I believe, is how we are judged at the end. How much did you help other people to create momentum in their lives, right? There's a quote in the book that I love that says, legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about how you've helped others move forward. And that is really the idea behind the challenge coin, is that we want to help create momentum for other people so that they turn around and do it for somebody else, because that's the type of legacy that has your name remembered long after you're gone.
That's beautiful. I'm going to give you a chance to do it right now. The final piece of advice for a listener who wants to be more consistent, to be better at moving the chains on a daily basis.
Yeah. So first of all, I love moving the chains. I love that. As a former athlete, I get it. And what I would say is this: a lot of people who are in survival mode find it really hard to be optimistic. There is one silver lining to being in survival mode, and that's it forces you to be in the moment you're in and nothing more. And so use this survival mode that you're in right now to understand that you only have to focus on the moment that you're in to create enough momentum to get you out. And the beauty of living your life moment to moment is that we have hundreds of moments that happen every single day. Get out of an all or nothing mindset and start understanding that you're one moment away from your entire life changing. And if it didn't happen in the moment you're in, maybe it'll happen in the moment that's next. And when you start living your life that way, you're going to find yourself creating momentum to take you where you want to go and getting out of that mindset that it's either going to be yes or no.
That's well said. I love it, Brant. Where can listeners get more of you, and where can they find the book?
Online, it's brantmenswar.com, BRANTMENSWAR.com. Any social is Brant at Brant Menswar. On whatever platform you are, I promise you I am there. And so look for me there as well. But don't be afraid to reach out. I don't have a team of people that are looking and vetting. I have me, and I'm happy to make that connection with you and help you in any way that I can.
And the book?
The book, you can get it at Barnes & Noble. You can get it at Books A Million. You can get it at on Amazon if you have to. I would encourage you to go and support your local bookstore, support that mom and pop store. They if they don't have it, they can get it. That would be my ask, is that let's support our local communities.
I dig it. All right, Brant, thanks so much for hanging out with us on the Move the Change podcast. For our listeners, I'm glad you're here. I'm excited for this conversation and for all the future guests to be able to bring you tips and tools on how to move the chains in your daily life. More real world examples from my life, from our guest life, coaching clients, friends, and all types of high performing, successful people. So you can see how they have their version of move the chains to fuel their successes. Thanks for listening. Make sure you subscribe on the Move the Chains podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you have or had during this show an emotional reaction and dug this, maybe share it with somebody else who would enjoy hearing it. That's it. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you.